Welcome to AP Chemistry at Hononegah High School. I'm Brian Brown, and in this Parent Help movie, you'll get a chance to see what your sons and daughters have been doing so far in the year of AV chemistry. So, what is it they're listening to at night and why are they listening to it? So it's an opportunity for me, if you weren't able to come to back to school night or you weren't able to be here for parent teacher conferences, it's a chance for me to talk with you in a more one-on-one setting to explain what's happening in class, remind you of some of the resources that are available and what my website is, and just give you some help if you're having trouble helping your son or daughter when they need help. So if you need to contact me, there is my email address and the website I'm going to be showing you a little bit later. That is the HononegahHaiKuLearning.com account that can take you to my website. Okay, first off, in the traditional classroom, um, what really happens is for the most part passive direct instruction and lecture with some activities blended in where classroom discussions, reviewing homework, labs, tests, those sorts of things. But in the traditional classroom, really about 75 or more percent of your time is really just talking to the students. It's direct instruction, which is a passive learning type situation, and less than 10% of, or I should say less than 25% of it is probably active and engaged learning. And what happens at home? Well, that's where you work on your book assignments and read your book. Now, the problem with that is you're basically being abandoned. You've got nobody there to help you if you need help with a homework problem. And it makes sense to me with the type of class that I'm teaching, which is a high content, more rigorous type of class, to flip that around a little bit and do things in a different way so that instead of abandoning you to work on your homework at home, hopefully you can get that done in class where I can help you. So at school is I'm going to try and do more of the active and engaged stuff. Discoveries, activities, reviewing homework, labs, and tests, and actually physically doing your homework. And then at home, that's where the direct instruction, listen to me talk stuff is typically happening. On average, a typical set of notes is anywhere between 15 and 18 minutes, which is great because I've boiled down to what I would typically do for 40 to 45 minutes in a class, and I can now do it in less than 20 minutes in that setting. Now, some of the disadvantages of this technique, which is often referred to as a flipped classroom technique, but this is kind of my own version of the flipped classroom technique. If they're listening to me outside of class and then the active engaged stuff in class, one of the downfalls is I need to trust that students will actually listen to the instruction. Now, about 60% of AP concepts are more fundamental. Really hearing it one or two times are probably enough to get a basic understanding of those. And then 40% is the more difficult math problem type questions and active application type questions that are really a little bit more difficult to master. And with this version, I can actually spend a lot more time on that 40%. Now, at one time, 100% of that was done in the classroom. If they don't watch my notes, they're going to miss the 60% of material that I will probably not mention in class at all unless there's questions. And they're going to miss that first really important exposure to the 40% that I would consider more difficult. So they've got a huge gap if they don't take the time to actually listen to the instruction. Another potential problem is a need for necessary technology. Now, they can watch or download the movies that they're going to be watching on their computer, their laptop, their tablet, their iPad or iPod, or on their data phone if they've got one. If none of those work, they can come in before school, at lunch, or after school to either my room, the library, or any computer lab. Or if they really need to, they can always ask me and I can just dump it onto a flash drive or a disk for them if they don't have internet access at home. So I do rely on the fact that they have to have, while there are a large number of ways in which they can get around this, they have to have the necessary technology to get done. And there may be times at different points in the semester where maybe that technology breaks down at home, and I have to be flexible with that type of thing. So if there is ever an issue, remind them to come in the morning and talk to me. I'll always be flexible if there really is an issue. And if the issue starts happening every single day, then that's where they need to be doing something differently. But every once in a while, I can see something happening. They just need to let me know. Now, some of the advantages of this technique and some of my disadvantages actually wrapped into advantages. Well, one, less time is spent passively hearing me talk at them. They can do this really at any time. More time is then going to be devoted to spending quality time on the higher order application skills and other engaged activity. I get more repetitions and exposures to the difficult concepts. And it's not just me saying it 3 times, it's me saying it 3 times in different ways to achieve better understanding. And it also, and this is huge, gives them more time to process difficult material. When they've heard it last night and they've looked through those sections or pages in the book, they come to class with enough background information to often really understand what it is they're confused about. When they're hearing something for the first time, it's just all Greek, and sometimes they can't even identify what they don't really understand. But it gives them that extra day to process that information before we talk about it in class the next day, or before they ask me about it the next day. They also get, or it also will give me more time to help struggling students without them needing to stop in before or after school. In that last chunk of the period where they're working on their homework, they've got one-on-one tutorial time if they take advantage of it. Other advantages. Students can listen to direct instruction in shorter time segments. My son happens to be severe and profound ADHD. Sometimes for him, 5 minutes is maybe all he can listen to at this point, or all he has time to listen to at that point. And that brings me to another related idea. Let's say you hear something in class. You can't just say, Mr. Brown, rewind, and hear it again. And most students don't take the time to raise their hand and say, I didn't really get that. Because this is AP Chemistry. They're with a bunch of top students. They don't want to be the one, and they often think they're the only one, but there are usually multiple ones who raises their hand and say, can you please say that again? I don't quite get it. Most of the time, they don't take the time to do that. At home, they can hit rewind and listen to it again. They can also be flexible in matching their homework time with their busy schedule. So if I only have time to get part of the notes done now, I can always finish it when I come back home later in the evening. And they also have the flexibility to work ahead if they know they've got busy nights coming. The material is made available to them very early in the chapter, so they can often get large chunks of it done ahead of time if they know they've got busy time coming up. They also won't miss key points if they're absent, because all of the stuff I tell them and teach them, they will still be able to hear. So they will never miss anything when they're absent. Now they'll miss the reteaching, and that may take time for them to come in and talk to me about that. But they're going to be taught every single thing because all they have to do is listen to it at home. Now results. So when I went to this technique full-time last year, I had tested the year before and found out I liked it. But what did I see different after I used the technique? Well, first, and this wasn't one test, this was every test. Every single test averaged increased. Every single chapter, every single time, beginning of the year to end of the year. Students were showing me they had better understanding when they got to the test. And to me, that was huge because that's my first criteria is I've taught it to you, you've practiced it, but do you really know it? And I saw across the board, A students to our struggling students, every single person was doing better because the test average went up. Now, if I compared what happened last year on the AP test to what happened the last time I taught my class by the traditional method, there's actually an 18% increase in the pass rate, which would be the number of students getting a 3 out of 5 on the AP test. An 18% increase was a huge increase. And if I compared it to every year I've taught, it was still always 10% better than my best year before that. Another thing is if I compare what they did last year on the AP test to what they did the last time I taught the full year using the traditional method, I saw a 0.5 increase in the average from 2 years ago. Now, from the previous year, because I'd done half of the year with this technique, I still saw almost a 0.3 increase out of a score of 1 to 5. And on a 5-point scale, a 0.5 increase is a huge increase. So across the board with every statistical instrument that I really cared about where they could prove to me what they knew, I saw an increase in this technique. So I knew it was something that was working across the board. Now, what's a typical night of homework going to look like, and how is that different from what it was before? And and what's class going to look like? Because I want you to understand what you should be seeing at home and what your son or daughter is going to be seeing in class. First off, if they didn't have time to finish the book assignment to completion, that's probably one of the things they'll be doing is finishing up homework from the day before. Now realize this is after they had a day to hear the notes, a day in class where I reteach, and gave them time to work on it. Next, they'll be watching and filling out the note sheet for the video that we'll be discussing in class tomorrow and the video that their next set of homework will be over. And remember, and this is an important one because this is something my wife said to me very early on when I was describing this technique to her is, aren't they going to think that they're teaching chemistry to themselves? No. Remember, who made the notes and who made the note worksheets they're filling out? I made those. So they're hearing every single thing they used to hear from me. And it's me teaching it to them. But now I get the added bonus of teaching it again the next day and asking after they've had time to process it for more help. So no, they are not reteaching or teaching themselves. It's giving me more opportunities to teach them. Now, another thing to think about is very few people are probably ready to help their son or daughter on an AP question from chemistry. There are exceptions to that, but most of the parents out there, they're going to look at it and they're not going to be ready to say, oh, you just need to do this. Well, monitoring video watching and making sure they're doing their homework on time and coming to class prepared is a lot easier than helping them with their AP chemistry homework. Now, what's class going to look like? Well, 5 to 10 minutes, we go over the book assignment. And one of the nice things about this technique is if I need it, I can spend a huge chunk of time answering their questions. So every single question they do in homework, we will go through thoroughly, and every student will get a chance to see exactly how it's done and be able to ask questions about it. I used to do this in less than 5 minutes. Now I typically take between 5 and 15. I get a much more thorough understanding from the students from the homework, and the homework becomes a much more useful process with this added time. Next 5 to 15 minutes is reviewing the more complex or key ideas from last night's homework and asking if there's any questions about the material from the previous night's homework, because we always go through and look at those key ideas. And sometimes this is very quick if it was a more rudimentary set of notes. Other times this is going to take maybe as much as 15 minutes. Now, it gives me a chance to reteach in a different way, go through the math problems and maybe try another math problem if I see students are still having trouble with it. And it gives me multiple exposures to complex ideas where they've had time to process. Sometimes I'll also have time to do other activities in class, some small group stuff or demos that are related to last night's notes. And then it gives me 10 to 30 minutes for them to work on their book assignment in class, the traditional homework. Not done at home, but done in class where they can ask me for help and quickly and efficiently do it. Now, one of the things I've been working on this year is I find that, like a lot of teachers, I'm great at talking. So this 5 to 15 minutes can quickly swell and become too large, and that shortens down this amount. So what I've really been trying to focus on this year, and as the year's gone on, I've gotten better and better at doing it, is making sure I give them more time to work on homework and pare down that reteaching time to as minimum as possible. Now, next thing I wanted to do was make you familiar with the website that your son or daughter should be looking at and using on a regular basis. So I want to look at the AP Daily Schedule, where it's at, what a chapter page looks like, and what resources are available on it, what's on the resource page, some things about the online textbook, and then your final assignment here, because doing this and listening to this, filling out the questionnaire will earn your son or daughter 2% of extra credit, is for you to print out the AP resources sheet, which reminds you some of the key resources, read through it so you're familiar with it, so you can help them say, are you doing this if they're struggling? And then give it to your student and have them read it again, because it never hurts to have them look again and again and again what resources are available, because they may forget, oh, that's right, I could do that, and that might help me get ready to do the best I can on the next test. So if you open up to the website, what you're going to see is this. So this is the front page. It's the daily schedule. And basically, this is exactly what we've done every day so far during the semester. And as it reminds you at the beginning, what's in brackets is the due date for that given assignment. And in parentheses is the length of time for the note movie, because I always want them to know so that they can budget their time better. Anything in red is a test. So if we go down here to the end, we are almost at the end of first quarter. So this assignment would be due by next Monday, turned in for them to get their 2%. And you can see our next test will be next Thursday over chapter 6, 7, and 21. So this is basically an updated list. Every time we start a new chapter, the full chapter set is up there so they can exactly see what's coming. So if they're sick, miss a day, or they forgot what we did in class, they can always find it out. Now the AP Welcome tab is some stuff for them that we went through at the beginning of the year and my welcome movie to intro them into the class over the summer. And then if you click on any of the chapter sets, it basically discusses the different chapters. Like chapter 1 through 3, which was our opening chapter, it goes through and discusses in brief the chapters and reminds them of what the different chapters were. In a normal set, like the one we're just on, 6 through 21, basically it goes through and reminds them about what they're going to be looking at each and every day. And then below that, on that center column are the note movies that they watch. And notice they're linked to YouTube. Most students prefer that because they can listen to it on so many different platforms. But if they're at a place where YouTube is blocked, they can always go over here in the other margin and hear all the note movies in WMV file form. So they can actually download the file and listen to it that way. So they have another option to find out what's happening with the movies. Also in the far right-hand column here are the downloads for the chapter. And if you go to a previous chapter, you can see downloads there as well. And it has, at the very end, the test help movie in both formats, YouTube and WMV file format. So that way, if they want to spend quality time as efficiently as possible getting ready for the test, they can watch the test help movie. I go through and evaluate over the past 3 to 4 years what types of questions students typically struggle with on the test. And I do a reteaching of it. And that way they're focusing and concentrating on not what they know, but what students typically struggle with on the test. And that's available for every single chapter. So if you go back through off in the margin, you can see the test help movies for all of the different chapters are there, and they're kept up. So if they're doing the retake test option, that's still available through the retake time period to use that to review to help get ready for the retake as well. That's something that'll be mentioned on the resource sheet when you read it. Now, finally, the resource page here. Off on the side are various practice tests for different things. Like we took an ION test at the beginning of the year. This is the same test in different order. They could use that to help prepare for that ION test. There's access to the online textbook. First time through, they would use the online textbook tab here and this code to set up. And then after that, they just click on the login screen, and that will then take them to a login that gets them into the test or the chapter book. So this is what they'll log into. So if you go to chapter 6, for instance, there is a summary of the chapter that's first listed. They can actually get into the chapter and look at all the pages through this. That's the ebook option over here in the left-hand margin. And I also have two things I wanted to point out over here, the practice quiz and the additional practice questions. Every single test in every single chapter in the book, there is an online practice test that they can take. It includes a hint if they're having trouble answering the question. They go through and they click in their answers. And when they are done, at the very bottom of the screen, they can submit their answers for grading. And it'll show them what they got correct, what they got wrong, and it'll do a quick reteaching if they got it wrong for anything that was wrong. And that same thing is basically what the additional practice test is. The practice quiz is usually around 20 to 30 questions tied to the objectives for the chapter. And this is an additional anywhere between 30 and 60 additional questions related to other ideas. And it's in the exact same format. And this is a great technique for somebody to practice getting ready for a test alone or in a small group. Some students never even realize, or I mention it, but never take the time to go on and look at that practice test option. So that's what's available besides just the textbook. Now, next is the AP resources. This is the sheet that I want you to click on and print out. Take a look at it and then pass it on to your son or daughter that reminds you of just some things about homework, some things about if they're struggling with tests, what resources are available to them that can help them get the grade that they want. And I'm not going to go through those things because you can see and read them. But that gives you kind of an overview of what the class is, how we're doing the class and why, and some of the resources that are available online. So thank you for taking the time to find out what we're doing in class and to help your student do the best they can.